We're going to get right back into our series looking at the book of Matthew. So if you will, please turn with me to Matthew chapter 15. Matthew chapter 15. We're going to start right at the beginning at verse 1. When you find it, read it aloud with me if you would like. Chapter 15, verses 1 and 2, we're going to start with. Then the scribes and the Pharisees who were from Jerusalem came to Jesus, saying, "Why do your disciples transgress the tradition of the elders? For they do not wash their hands when they eat bread." All right, the Pharisees came to Jesus, brought an accusation. Why do your disciples transgress the tradition of the elders? They don't wash their hands when they eat bread, Jesus. I don't know how many of you are very careful about washing your hands before you eat, or just washing your hands in general. It's a good idea, right, to keep your hands clean because you don't want to be bringing germs and things into your bodies. But you know what? The Pharisees here, they're being picky about washing their hands before they eat bread. It has nothing to do with physical health or cleanliness. It doesn't have anything to do with physical health or cleanliness. What they were stuck on, or rather what they were focused on, is about defilement, about ceremonial uncleanliness. They washed their hands before they eat, just in case when they were in the marketplace they had contacted and touched a heathen, someone who was not a Jew, that they had touched something that was ceremonially unclean. When they take cups, they'll wash the cups in case somebody else had drink from it. Right? They were very much concerned about coming into contact with those who were not Jews. Right? And you see in this tradition that they have that it's a tradition that's not a Mosaic law. So it was not a law that was given by God to Moses, to the people of Israel, but it was a tradition that the elders have set up. And by the elders, it's just people from the past. Right? The fathers that came before them, they've set up this tradition for the people to follow because you cannot, the law says you cannot be ceremonially unclean. And so the elders set up a tradition, which is you always need to wash your hands before you eat. In case you have touched anything unclean, you're cleansed. But we see also in this tradition that they set up, that it really goes to illustrate and demonstrate the pride that the Pharisees had in themselves. Right? We are different than the other people. We are better, and they are dirty. They are unclean. If we touch them, God forbid, I better wash that filth off my hands. Right? It's like heathen cooties. Right? I got to get it all off my hands, or else I am going to be unclean when I eat, when I introduce whatever I touch from them into my body. And you know, and so you can see, you can hear that in their voice, right? Once you know this background, you can hear that in their voice, that tone of disdain for anyone who is not them, right? Why do your disciples transgress this tradition? They don't wash their hands when they eat bread. Do you understand? They might have touched someone dirty and they're defiling themselves, right? And so this is what they bring. This is the issue that the Pharisees bring to Jesus. Now, can you see why Jesus would have a problem with this kind of attitude? Right? He came to save all mankind. Yes, there was a differentiation between the Jews and the Gentiles. But Jesus says he's come to save all the world. Right? And so he's not going to be very happy with this kind of attitude. And look at how Jesus answers. Look at how Jesus answers in verse 3. He answered and said to them, "Why do you also transgress the commandment of God because of your tradition?" And so Jesus basically one-ups them, right? I don't know if you've ever played cards where you keep your hand hidden, right? And then your opponent's been laying down cards or whatever game you play, and they feel like they're doing well, but you have that one card that's going to trump everything they have. That's what Jesus brings out, right? You have your traditions. You hold on to them so tightly, and you're so invested in them. Guess what? I have something even greater than your traditions. The commandment of God, from God himself. Not from the people, not from the elders. The commandment of God. And he says, you accuse my disciples? You accuse my disciples of transgressing these traditions? Your traditions transgress the commandments of God. Your traditions go against the word, the very command, the very law of God. And he gives them a very specific example. Verses 4 to 6. For God commanded, saying, honor your father and your mother, and he who curses father or mother, let him be put to death. But you, in your traditions, you say, whoever says to his father or mother, whatever profit you might have received from me is a gift to God, then he need not honor his father or mother. Thus you have made the commandment of God of no effect by your tradition. Okay? When the commandment that God gave us says, honor your father and mother, right? Honor your father and mother. What does that mean, to honor your father and mother? It's not just paying lip service. It's not just saying, oh, Dad, you're so great, or Mom, you're so great, or, just once a year, Happy Mother's Day, Happy Father's Day. I used to do that. I still do sometimes, play around with my kids, right? When you address me, you must say, dear Father, right? Don't come and say, hey, Dad, can I have something? I say, no, you must say, dear Father, may I please have, right? That's not really honoring, right? It's not about what you say or how you say it. To honor your father or mother, part of that is to take care of their needs. Just as they took care of you and provided for your needs when you were young and unable to take care of yourself, so it is when they are older and they need your help, honor them by providing for them their needs. Right? And this is why, for Alice and myself, we try very hard to involve our kids when we take care of our elders. We try to get them to help, right? Grandma's walking a little slow when crossing the street, go hold her hand, right? Push their wheelchairs. Help. Why? Because we want our kids to understand and see this is what you should do. This is natural. This is the way you honor your father and mother. Why is that a good idea for me and Alice to get our kids invested in doing this? Because we're training them. Because one day we're going to need help. Right? We're over 25. We're already, going downhill, right? The downhill stage of life. Things are breaking down. I'm here shuffling back and forth because one of my knees is hurting. My body's not what it used to be. There's going to come a day when they need to push me around in my wheelchair. Get them used to it now, to know this is how you serve the elders. Don't just leave them by the wayside. Right? Honor your father and mother has very practical applications, and so we get our kids involved so they know how to do it. And we want them to see firsthand the way you take care of grandma and grandpa, this is the way you should take care of mom and dad when mom and dad get old. Right? And there's going to come a time very likely when your parents may have financial need. And God's commandment, even though when it says honor your father, it never said explicitly that you need to provide them with financial need. We see by what Jesus says here that that's understood. Because Jesus uses this example and he says, look, the Pharisees, you have your tradition which says, whatever money I was supposed to give to you, mom and dad, to help you out, well, that's a gift that I gave to God. I gave it as an offering in the synagogue. And so I'm sorry, but God takes precedence this week. And so you don't get what was coming to you. But I have done my duty. And that makes it okay. This was their tradition that Jesus pointed to. He says, your tradition transgresses the commandment of God because you are providing a loophole through which your people will think that they have obeyed this commandment, right? In being exempt from it. No, you have broken the commandment by not helping your parents when they're in need. And so Jesus points to them and says, your traditions, they are so fixed on legalities, so fixed on making sure all the check marks are checked, and you completely forget what was the intent behind what God gave in the commandment, right? Whatever money I was going to give to you, Dad, I'm sorry, I gave, right? What kind of tradition is that? But it was what they had. And so Jesus points to that and says, there is something very wrong with you, Pharisees. You and your traditions, right? And you hold so tightly to those traditions that you pride yourself in obeying these traditions. Verse 7 to 8 to 9. Verse 7 to 9. Hypocrites. Right? Look what Jesus calls them. Hypocrites. What is a hypocrite? Someone who says one thing and does another. Jesus says, hypocrites, well did Isaiah prophesy about you. Right? So Jesus refers back to Isaiah's prophecy. And he says, he prophesied about you people. And he did it well. Verse 8, these people draw near to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips. But their heart is far from me, and in vain they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men. Right? The Pharisees' problem, one of many. The one problem that Jesus is exposing here is they say all the right things. Right? With their mouths, they draw close to God. With their lips, they honor God. They say all the right things. They pray their prayers in public. And they do it so well, and they do it zealously. Right? They'll tell you, nobody does it better than the Pharisees. They do this so well, they are honoring God with their lips, but Jesus says, your problem is your mouth is doing the right thing, your lips are doing the right thing, but your heart is so far away from God. God himself said this, right? You honor me with your mouth, you honor me with your lips, you draw close to me with your mouth, your heart is far away from me. And so the result, Jesus says, the result is that your worship is in vain. Right? All these things that you are doing, all these traditions that you keep in thinking that you are being holy unto God, all of this that you are doing is in vain. What does it mean when something is done in vain? It means it achieves no purpose. Right? Vanity, that idea of emptiness. Right? When you're doing something and it produces nothing. Right? And so that's what their problem is. Their worship is in vain. And that's gotta hurt. Imagine yourself in the Pharisees' shoes. You've been doing all these things all your life. You've been holding on to all these traditions, thinking that you are worshiping God. And then to have someone come and say all the things that you've been doing is empty. It's achieved nothing. On both ends, number one, God's not pleased with it. Because it's in vain. It hasn't pleased God. And so all these things that you're doing, you're thinking you're pleasing God. It hasn't pleased God. And number two, not only does it not please God, it brings you yourself no benefit. Because you've basically wasted your time in following all these traditions. In saying all these things about God. But in reality, it's achieved nothing. And so Jesus says, this is your problem. Right? You are coming and teaching as doctrines the commandments of men. You're taking all these traditions that your fathers and forefathers have said, and you are teaching them as if they are commandments. But they're not. Not only are they not commandments, they actually go against the very thing that God commanded, the very thing that God wishes to see in us. And so Jesus then, he goes on to say, to explain what was wrong with the original assertion that the Pharisees made. So if you remember, coming back to the beginning of the passage, the Pharisees came and said, why do your disciples not wash their hands before they eat? So Jesus then comes back and counters their accusation. Verse 10. Verse 10, Jesus when he had called the multitude to himself, he said to them, hear and understand, not what goes into the mouth defiles a man, but what comes out of the mouth, this defiles a man. And so notice again, Jesus here, when he's speaking to the multitude, he gives them an illustration, but he doesn't give them an explanation. Right? We've seen this pattern where Jesus gives an illustration, a parable, but he doesn't give an explanation to the masses. Right? The disciples, though, they do come. They come and ask for clarification. Or rather, at first they come and they ask, why in the world did you say this to the Pharisees, Jesus? Right? Look at verse 12. Then his disciples came and said to him, do you know that the Pharisees were offended when they heard this saying? Right? Jesus, do you know what you just did? You just made upset a whole sect of rulers and leaders. They're not happy with what you said. And Jesus, you're already in a lot of trouble with them, so maybe we can tone it down a little bit, right? Do you not know that the Pharisees were offended when they heard these sayings? Jesus answered and he said, every plant which my heavenly Father has not planted will be uprooted. Right? Remember when we looked at the parable of the wheat and the tares. right? There are those that the Heavenly Father has sown, and there are those that the devil has sown. And at the time of judgment, Jesus said, the wheat will be gathered into the barns, and the tares. I don't know if you remember this when we looked at the parable, right? The wheat and the tares that grow together. And I looked a little bit into this. The tares are actually these weeds that look physically like wheat, right? And it gives a lot more meaning to what Jesus said about the wheat and the tares, because you have these two things growing side by side that look outwardly identical. The only difference is the wheat, it's got grains that you can eat. The tares, they are weeds, and the grains are black and not edible. It looks the same, but it's not usable. It's not useful, right? And so Jesus has said in the parable that these two things will grow together. At the end times, one of them will be rooted and thrown into fire. And he says here, every plant which my Heavenly Father has not planted will be uprooted. Don't worry about the Pharisees, he says, right? Let them alone. They are blind leaders of the blind, and if the blind leads the blind, both will fall into a ditch. Right? So don't worry, disciples, that they are offended. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're saying. And those that they lead who are willing to follow them, they're all going to fall into, they're not going anywhere. And so don't worry about them. Verse 15, then Peter answered and said to him, explain this parable to us. Right? And again, what we look at, this principle of the explanations, the expositions are given to those who have a thirst, who have a hunger, who want to know more. Right? When you hear a word from the Lord and you don't understand it, come and ask. Jesus is more than willing to give us the meaning and the life behind the word. But we got to take that step and ask. And so here's Peter. Comes to him and says, explain this parable to us. And so here we go. We're unlocking the secret. Verse 16, so Jesus said, are you also still without understanding? Do you not yet understand that whatever enters the mouth goes into the stomach and is eliminated? Whatever goes into the mouth, whatever you eat, goes into your stomach and is eliminated. You probably remember this from biology, those of you that have taken it. And those of you that haven't, he'll give you a little preview. Right? Our digestive tract, we think of it as being in our body, right? Because it's inside the body. But if you think of it, it is actually a tube that goes straight through our body, goes in one and out the other. How many of you have ever played with those? They kind of look like sea cucumbers. It's like a little rubber tube, and you know how do I describe it? It's filled with liquid, and you squeeze it, and it just it goes. There's a tube, and it just runs straight through. That's our digestive tract. It technically is not in our body. It runs through our body, and so the things that we eat go in and out. That's what Jesus is saying, right? And he understands because he made us, right? There is nothing that is made that was not made through Jesus. He knows our inner workings. I don't know at this time if people understood the body's working. They probably thought we eat something and something mysterious goes in there and then the food comes out. But Jesus says it goes in and it goes right through you. Right? So what you put into you technically does not become part of you. It goes straight through. It doesn't actually go into your body. Right? And so Jesus is saying these things, it doesn't make you unclean. Right? The whatever ceremonial defilement that the Pharisees were worried about, Jesus says these things don't matter. These things don't matter. Here, though, Jesus says, here is what will make you unclean, and here is what you need to pay attention to and be careful about. Verses 18 and 20. But those things which proceed out of the mouth come from the heart, and they defile a man. Right? So it's not what you put into your mouth, but it's what comes out of your mouth. Why? Because what comes out of your mouth comes from the heart. For out of the heart, verse 19, out of the heart proceeds evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornications, thefts, false witness, blasphemies. These are the things which defile a man, Jesus says, but to eat with unwashed hands does not defile a man. So Jesus says, touching a heathen doesn't make you unclean. Touching a heathen, touching a Gentile doesn't make you unclean. What makes you unclean Pharisees, and all of us, what makes us unclean is what is in our heart. What makes us unclean is what is in our heart. And that's why we focus so much and so often on the matters of the heart. Right? And some of you, you've been hearing me speak for a while, you might say, why do we always talk about the heart? Well, because that's where life comes from. That's where what defines us comes from. Jesus says it, what comes out of your heart is what defiles a man. Right? The question then is, what's within you? What's inside you? What is coming out of you? Right? You know, I think, you know what's in your heart. If each of you were to take a moment and just to be quiet and think about the things that happen, the thoughts that you have. But we all have very good filters, do we not? Well, no, some of us don't have very good filters. I suggest installing a good filter. We filter what happens in our hearts. Because if everything that's in our heart comes out, I would dare suggest we wouldn't have very many friends. I probably wouldn't have gotten married. Right? We filter what comes out because we understand at some level these things are not good. These things are hurtful. These things are evil. These things are offensive and repulsive. And so we install a filter. We make sure that these thoughts, these whatever judgments don't come out. Right? And so we know very much to control those things, but it doesn't change what's in there. You filtered it, but it's still in there. That gunk is still in there, right? Jesus himself said, it's not just physical adultery that's a sin, but when you look at a woman and desire her and lust after her, you've committed adultery with her in your heart. Right? In the heart, that's where sin happens. When you're upset with your brother and you think ill thoughts of him and you are unrighteously angry with a brother and you wish him ill, that's murder, Jesus says. What's in your heart is what defiles you. You know, I have this tendency, I've come to recognize now, I did it before, but I have a tendency to always jump to the worst conclusions about people. Right? Someone tells me something, they haven't explained the whole situation, and by the middle of the second sentence, I've already decided my judgment about this person. Right? And always God puts me to shame, because when I hear about the whole circumstance, I find out, gosh, Jason, you jumped to conclusions that were completely wrong. You didn't understand, or you misunderstood, right? I have this tendency to do this. That's something in my heart that defiles me. And I've come to recognize this, and I come to recognize that this is something that is wrong with me, and I need God to help me with it. Right? So when we look at this list that Jesus gives of the things that are in our heart, there's probably more than this. Right? But he gives a pretty good list. Evil thoughts. Evil thoughts start within our hearts. Right? Murders. There is a difference. Our law says there is a difference between murder and killing. Because murder is premeditated. It starts in the heart. Right? Adulteries start in the heart. Fornications, thefts, when you steal something. What was the genesis of the theft? Well, in your heart you desire something that wasn't yours. Right? We talked about this when we looked at commandments. Theft starts in the heart. False witness, lying, saying something that is wrong, it starts in the heart. Blasphemy, speaking against God, starts in the heart. Right? These things all came in a package with our sinful nature. You didn't have to go out and buy this. It came pre-installed as part of the operating system that you were born with. This is us. This is our heart. This is our sinful nature. And man cannot change his own heart by his own will. Again, we can install a filter to make sure that these things don't come out. To make sure that the person seated next to us don't see it. But you know who sees it? When you look in there, you'll see it. You know who else sees it? God sees it. Right? But understand that when God sees it, he's not looking at you saying, ooh, gross. He's looking at you saying, you need help, and I want to help you. I want to help you overcome these things. I want to help wash these things away and take them away, because I want what comes out of you to be a spring of life. So you don't have to have that filter. So what comes out of you naturally is something that gives life rather than something that is harmful, that is hurtful, that would make someone stumble. right? This new life that's in us, it's not born by blood, right? So just because your parents are Christians and you grew up in church doesn't mean that you have this new life. It's not something that comes by the will of the flesh, not something that you can make happen on your own. It's not something that comes by the will of man, having someone else drill it into you, right? We do what we can to exercise what God teaches us, yes, but that can only go so far, right? We discipline ourselves, but at the root, God needs to make that change within us. You cannot change it yourself, right? And so, Alice relates something. She's been attending a lot of end of the year events, and she relates something from one of the graduation speeches that really hit home. One of the students, he shared about gratitude. Right? We should all be thankful. At the season of graduation, you should be grateful for everyone that's invested in you, that's made it possible for you to be here, because you didn't do it alone. You have parents who laboriously woke you up every morning, get you out of bed, got you to school, drove you to school maybe, right? You have teachers who pour themselves into you to teach and to build you into what you are today. So the time of graduation is not to say, hey, I did it, but it really is a time to be grateful to those who made it possible for you to come this far. And the student in his speech said, someone who has true gratitude, there's something that you see. You see compassion in them. Someone who is truly grateful will demonstrate compassion. Why? Because there is a true change in the heart when you are really grateful, and you learn that it's not just about you. You learn to think for others. Just as you are grateful for others who have done what they can to help you, if you are truly grateful, then you will turn it around and pass that on. Right? A lot of people know how to be grateful here. Right? We know how to be polite. We're trying to teach our kids to be polite. Every time, after something, after a class, say thank you to the teachers. Because guess what? They put in a lot of work, most of them, to teach this lesson. Right? After your instrumental lessons, we teach our kids, always say thank you. Right? What we can teach is this. Move your mouth and say thank you, right? Look them in the eyes when you say thank you. Make sure they're looking at you. Make sure you've got their attention. Don't the teacher's there, just walk by, thank you, right? Be genuine. But we can only teach so much. That true gratitude has to come from within the heart to be truly thankful. And to see a change in the heart, there's something that follows with it. Right? And so this is why we talk so much about the heart. Right? Outwardly, if all we do is outwardly modify how we behave so we look like a good person, that is in vain, Jesus says. It's in vain. It is not bad. Don't get me wrong. Don't go home and say, Jesus says don't bother being polite, right? It's in vain. No, you need to teach yourself and discipline yourself to be a godly person. But you need to also make sure that at the root, the heart is changed. And so Jesus can see what's truly in our hearts. Right? At the core, that change has to come within. And we need to ask Jesus, help me to bring about that change in my heart. Jesus, I can't do this on my own. Jesus, I cannot make myself new. Jesus, only you can do it. Only you can bring this redemption and regeneration into my life to make my faith real. Right? And so this morning, I hope what we can learn from what Jesus teaches is we need to come back and examine our hearts. Don't be satisfied with what people think of you. Because we're very good at helping make sure people think well of us. Don't be satisfied with that. Come back and ask Jesus, look at my heart, Lord. Look at there. Help me to look deep in the dark corners that I don't want to look at. And help me to see what's nasty in there. And Jesus, change my heart so that my worship, what's coming out of my mouth, what's coming out of my lips is not coming out in vain, but it is worship that comes in spirit and truth. Let's bow our heads to pray. Jesus, I thank you, Lord. I thank you, Lord, for your patience. that you are willing, Lord, to wait while we stagnate here sometimes, Lord, unable, unwilling, or not knowing how to change. But Lord, I thank you that you always give us opportunity to come back to you. And so this morning I pray, through your word, bring us back to you again, Lord. Help us, each and every one of us, to be willing to examine our hearts before you, to let you see, Lord, what is in there, to see that we really need you in your life within us. Teach us, Lord, so we are not worshiping like the Pharisees, with just our mouths and our lips, and doing it in vain. But Lord, help us to worship in spirit and in truth, Lord, with our very beings, with our heart changed by you. Pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.